Welcome to the Safari Yangu Podcast, a space where we share our stories unapologetically, experiences that shaped us, and experiences that continue to shape us. I'm your host, Miss Kimaru, and on today's episode, we are dealing with a very sensitive topic. You've probably seen a lot of videos online about Mike Sonko and his daughter and what happened to his daughter. She experienced gender-based violence, and this brought about the conversation of why do people stay, or even further conversation about gender-based violence and what that looks like. And also I think it goes hand in hand with the idea of the purple profiles all the way from South Africa, and we stand with our sisters from South Africa during this time when they're trying to look for a solution and for the government to declare femicide a crisis in South Africa. Gender-based violence affects both men and women, and more so, a lot of the most documented cases are violence against women in such a big way. So today we will be diving into that conversation, and we will also be looking at the idea of, or maybe dissecting the question, why do women stay, or why do people stay? And you've probably seen the comments. Some people say, if it was me, I would have left. Why did she choose to stay? Why complain if you're not going to leave? But what if the truth isn't that simple? What if it's not just black and white as we see it? Before we begin, I would like to give a disclaimer. This episode discusses domestic and gender-based violence. Please take care of your emotional well-being, and also my heart goes out to any person who has experienced gender-based violence in any form or shape. Let's start with the most popular question people ask: why didn't they just walk out? And before we even dig deeper and look at why it's not easy for somebody to just pack a bag and leave, I would like to give an example of somebody I know personally who has experienced gender-based violence, and she has spent almost her lifetime in her marriage. And recently I got to speak with her about her experience, and I asked the same question you guys are asking. Of course, now it was more a bit an open discussion, and she was willing to share. So I was like, what made you stay for all this long? Because when she was talking to me, at that point she was ready to leave. So I asked her, so why did you stay for all this long? Then she tells me that at that point she could not have left because she felt like this home where she was at gave her stability in the context of her kids had a roof over their shoulder. So she didn't have to worry about that. And at the time, she didn't earn enough to be able to rent a space to be able to move out with her kids and for them to have the kind of life they could have had. That's what she told me. That's why I don't think us simplifying it and asking people why they choose to stay or making sometimes ignorant comments online helps. I do also know about another person who stayed for the longest. She was experiencing gender-based violence in her marriage, and she stayed for more than 10 years. And while this was happening, no one in her family actually knew that it was happening to her until the day she was ready to leave. And that's when she opened up and talked about all the things that were happening to her, from the physical assault, the emotional abuse, the financial disenfranchisement. She was not allowed to work. She was disenfranchised in that way. She was not allowed to work, so she stayed. And these are just two examples of what I personally know, and the others I've already had, and there's so many examples, and I'm pretty sure even for you out there, you have an example that you might resonate with or you know. So we often ask, why don't people leave? Why do they stay longer? But we don't necessarily think, what does living look like for these people? What if for them living means they maybe lose their jobs, they lose that sort of stability where maybe they are worried about their kids because maybe they're not in a space where they can be able to financially accommodate their children and themselves? What if living for them means that they leave the comfort of a home where maybe they didn't have to pay rent because they had a home they built with this person? and now they are living to the unknown, and maybe they don't even have financial or even family support. In this episode, I want us to hold two truths at the same time. Yes, no one deserves to stay in an abusive marriage, and yes, living is often the hardest. We can agree that those two actually go hand in hand, that living is one of the hardest thing. It can be dangerous for some people, and sometimes it's almost an impossible choice. So it's not like everyone has the choice. It's not, I think when we look from the outside, it's very easy for us to ask these questions, and especially when we are not a victim and we go talk about why didn't she leave, why is she always complaining and she's not doing something about it, or stuff like that. I think it's kind of easy when you are outside giving an opinion from the outside. Let's talk about like the real reasons victims stay. And these, I have done my research. I have talked to people who have gone through gender-based violence, and we all know there's so many stories out here. One of the things that we fail to acknowledge is the emotional attachment and trauma bonding that happens. Like sometimes when you're in an abusive relationship, you could be manipulated. You're manipulated to think that this person who is hurting you, they also love you. So one day it's like there's this idea of my mom used to tell us that if you don't wash your hands, the rat will bite your hand, and what they'll do, they wanna kupuliza after they're done. They're like, so the nakupuliza. So when you live with an abusive person, there's that possibility you get trauma bonded with them, because 1 minute they're love bombing you, the next minute they're the ones who are hurting you, and then they apologize, they promise to change, and they tell you all these things, and most of the times you choose to believe them because you're trauma bonded to them. Abuse doesn't always start with a punch, it starts with love, and that's why it's so hard for people to leave, because sometimes you cling to that idea of, but you were so nice, or but she was so nice at the beginning, but this is the kind of love I experienced, so you hold on to the hope that things will actually get better. So there is actually that. Then it starts with that love, the attention they give you, and then they start withdrawing it from you, and then it causes some level of confusion. So someone is there and they are wondering like, yeah. So that's part of emotional attachment and trauma bonding. So one time these people are nice to you, another time they're not. The other one is fear. Living is often when the violence gets worse. Women have been killed while trying to escape. Many victims stay because they are trying to survive. Yes, sometimes you could be abused to the extent of you feel like you fear. Have you ever been in a situation where like mse amekukalia or stuff is happening in your life to the extent of this person is not even in the room, but you always feel like a heavy presence? That's when you are totally manipulated or you are living in fear. You even feel like they can see you even when they are not there. So these people anakuzia uoga, and then it gets to a point that it becomes hard. You feel like if I moved out, if this happened, and maybe even sometimes victims of gender-based violence have been threatened. Labda wanaambiwa, when you leave, I'll come for you. It doesn't matter where you go, nitakukujia. Yes, so that's also another example. You see now why when we ask, why is she staying, why is he staying, why it's not so black and white. Then the other one is financial dependence. From the example I gave you, I personally know of somebody, they stayed all that long. First, in the marriage, they were not allowed to work. Every time they wanted to start business or every time they got an opportunity, the husband was like, no. Stay aside, I'll take care of you and I'll take care of the children. Stay at home, hakuna kwenda kazi, and it was non-negotiable. So she stayed and stayed. And then now, one day, you realize that it's become so hard because this person is thinking, okay, I have this number of children. I don't have a job. Yes, I'm going through all this abuse, but where am I actually going to start from? Nitaanzia wapi? So there's that question of where they'll get started from. which is why most of the time, sometimes we are usually encouraged, even as women, that it's good to have something of your own, like usiache kazi juu umeolewa, or usiache kazi juu ya something. Yeah, but now if you're in a relationship already, if you get into a relationship or in a marriage, and mtu ameshaanza kukuambia uache kazi, and maybe it's not something that you want, that could be one of the signs as to you now starting to be economically disenfranchised in a way. Uko na disadvantage. I don't know how you will take this, but at the end of the day, I think it's good, even as a woman, to just work for stuff or have your own thing going on. And I would encourage men out here, allow your women to work, let them work, even if you can provide. What if something happened to you? What would happen to her and the kids if you passed on, like, without notice? So people, when somebody is thinking about leaving, they're thinking about no rent, they have no school fees for the children, there's no food, and so there's also no safety net, because it's not like they were able to save because hawako na job in the first place. So that's another one. And then there's also the idea of children and the family pressure. We grow up in homesteads where marriage has been sort of like, it's an expectation, it's seen as an accomplishment, and you get into this marriage, you get children, and now you think that you want to stay for the kids. You're like, oh, I can't leave my children, they'll miss their father, or they'll miss their mother, or whatever. And you continue staying. What I have seen, or in some of the examples I have seen, and an encounter I've encountered actually, was that somebody stayed for the children. And what happened was, you stay for the children, and then the kids grow up with some level of resentment towards you, or even towards your abuser. And then in the future, I have seen cases where some kids, they're like, you know what, I don't want to get married, or I'll never marry. Whatever I saw happen between my dad and my mom, it's not something that fascinates me about marriage. So the kids you were thinking you were staying to protect, they end up now as broken human beings. They're dealing with traumas and a lot of stuff because you stayed thinking that you were saving them. So yes, people also stay. They stay for children. They stay because the family tells them that, oh, marriage is hard. It doesn't come easy. You need to put more effort. I have seen peer cases where, like, marriage is not going so well. Maybe there's cheating, there's all these scandals, and women are being told, go on your knees, enda kwa magoti, uombe familia yako, uombe your husband, things will be okay, and stuff like that. And maybe when that person is cheating on you, they're also already abusing you emotionally or in any other form, or when you ask them questions, it's abuse, unakuja unapigwa. Yeah, so people stay because maybe even their families are like, yeah, marriage ni ngumu, ombea husband wako ama bibi yako. And then there's also the idea of, what will people say? Sometimes, because we have set up marriage to look like an accomplishment to some extent, sometimes people now think about, what will people say? Hata sijaweza kukaa kwa hii marriage miaka 2, ama sijafanya nini na nini na nini. So you think about other people's perception of you, or what they will even say, and you let that guide why you stay or not. So yeah, as you can see, again, it's not so black and white. And then there's the isolation and manipulation. If you've ever been in a broken or manipulative relationship, you would easily find that a person who manipulates you, they isolate you from the people you know. They start first by isolating you from the people you even talk to every day, like your friends, your family. They start making first. They make it look like your world rotates around them, and you become their everything. They become your everything. So they start isolating you mdogo from your loved ones, and then so at some point you get manipulated to think that they are there for you in every way. So even when they abuse you, because they've already isolated you from your family and from your friends, you can no longer speak about your issues. Because I mean, if you used to have this friend you talk to almost on a daily, and now you isolated her, so kila mtu kwa shughuli zake, they don't care much about you because you isolated them, and also you're not even going to them in the first place. Then you will stay with your story, and if your story is that you're being abused, that stays with you longer than it should have. You will be cut off from your friends, you are cut off from your community. You get, they also get you to a place, if they manipulate you, they get you to a place where you start doubting yourself. You lose your confidence, you doubt your decision making. They can gaslight you. They gaslight you to death, manze. And you might wonder, like, unanza, you start having like a distorted reality. You start having a distorted reality, and getting out of that can be so hard. It can be so hard, And then the other one is lack of support systems. Some people, they don't have even friends. Some people don't have family members. Maybe some people are even orphaned. They don't have people they can say like, oh, I have a mom or a dad to return to. In the case of Sonko's daughter, as you could see from the clip, the dad showed up for her. The parents showed up for her. If she wanted to live with them, she could have left with them. But there are some people who don't have that kind of support system. They really have to fight for themselves. And often, sometimes even when you go to report, at the police, some police will tell you like, oh, go home and then solve and then mkongea story itaenda ishe. Sometimes your family members will tell you again, as I said, enda ukaiombe story. Others will tell you like, especially something like the church, they'll tell you something like God hates divorce. So you end up staying longer as a victim of gender-based violence. They might end up staying longer because waliambiwa na kwa kanisa, God hates divorce, and it has been ingrained in them. So they are really struggling, and they want to make this marriage survive as long as it can, because God hates divorce at the end of the day. So they stay, not because they want to, but because they see no safe space out there. Are you really as a safe space? Even as we think about people in our own community, in our own families, have you ever encountered somebody who's going through gender-based violence, and maybe you've helped speak up for them, you've opened their doors for them, and showed up for them, even if it's just emotionally, or given them a shoulder to lean on, or listen to them? Yeah. And then the other one. So but also as we think about all those are some of the examples of why people stay. Some people, let's look at it also in the other context of some people are frustrated watching victims go back again and again. You could have a supportive system out here as a person going through gender-based violence, but then you keep going back to the person who hurt you. You go to your sister, you tell them that, oh, Flani hurt me, let me stay in your house for a couple of days. You stay maybe, and then after some time they go back. So as an example, as that sister, you might start getting frustrated because you're like, why is she going back, or why are they going back? You start worrying about their children. You are like, they don't understand why somebody will stay with a person who hurts them. And to some extent, that concern is valid, which is probably why some people are like, why are people staying? But the mistake we often make is turning that concern into judgment. So at some point, the concern turns into judgment. Unaanza kuwa judge, you're like, huyo mtu manzeni kama ameshindwa to make their own decisions. Why kwani they couldn't leave, they can't report, why did he abuse her? So you start thinking about, okay, so what is it that she did? And then at some point you even start thinking that maybe she actually deserved it. Maybe she actually deserved it. Yeah, so that's part of the judgment I'm talking about. Here's really what we really talk about, and this is the debate that really makes it online. Kenya as a society, it has normalized suffering in relationships. Unaambiwa uvumilie tu. Vumilia, tomorrow will be better, things will get better. As women, we are taught to sacrifice. We're taught to sacrifice. Men are taught to control their homes. Some families will protect the abuser to save their reputation. There are people who like that thing cannot even go to the police. They're like, we are gonna talk about it hapa tu nyumbani kwetu. So they end up protecting the abuser. And sometimes when you protect an abuser, ni kama unamwongezea nguvu. You empower them, or is it empowering? Or you help them justify the things they do because you are trying to cover up for your reputation. And some communities, they believe that abuse is a private matter. Yeah, so in the context of shame. So we are like, oh, apana, let's talk about it here at home. Let's solve it here. Like probably there are some families who would not have put those clips online like Sonko did, because they are like, hey, we don't want shame to follow us. So we see it as shame, and we see it as a private matter that does not need to see the light of day. So people don't talk about it. So when you see a victim staying, remember, they're not just fighting one person. Sometimes they could be fighting a whole system, from the family unit, the police, the country, the people out here, and all our opinions that we are putting online under every video, in every comment section, every chance we get. So that's what could be going through a victim's mind, or that's what they could actually be processing. But maybe the question shouldn't be why didn't she leave or why didn't he leave, but rather what made it impossible for her to leave. That kind of opens that discussion and gives them a safe space to even know that they are heard as victims of gender-based violence, or people even care about them, or what should safe living require. Like, for example, I have seen a lot of gender-based violence victims. Like, for example, with Njeri Migwi, with Usikime, she opened up a space where she accommodates women who go through all these. Do we have enough spaces like those, like safe spaces where women can run to, or men can run to, in case of they are going through gender-based violence in their homes or in their communities? Do we have such spaces? Do we have spaces where people can go talk about their issues without being judged, whether it's online, on podcasts? Are we opening up these spaces for people to be able to articulate what they are going through? And how can you be part of the solution in eradicating gender-based violence, or even issues femicide? Okay, so instead of like judging people, what would happen if we said, I believe you, okay, it's not your fault, and how can I support you? Imagine how powerful that is. Like, somebody is going through gender-based violence, you tell them you believe them, it's not their fault that they're there, and you ask them, how can I support you? Imagine the turnaround we will have in such a conversation. If you take anything from this conversation, let it be this. Sometimes the door is wide open, but everything outside that door looks more dangerous than what is inside. Because as we said, like, whatever is happening in the mind of a gender-based victim person or gender-based victim, it's like they could be in a lot of emotional turmoil, and they don't know, they're so they don't know what will happen for their future. They don't understand, like, ni kama hauoni mbele. Have you ever been in a space where you feel like, even if you're not a victim of gender-based violence, but even on a personal level, unafeel nika umefika mwisho? They're probably in that space and they don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, So living isn't always a choice. Sometimes it's actually a privilege. But for us as outsiders, it's very easy, because if you're not a victim, it's very easy to think in that way, like, sutoke tu. But sometimes it's such a privilege for somebody to get to a place where they are able to actually live and save their lives, the lives of their children, and their future. So if you're listening and you're in a violent relationship, you're not alone. There are organizations, shelters, and people who will work with you. And in Kenya, we have a toll-free helpline for gender-based violence, and it's 1195. So if you're going through gender-based violence, you're a victim, please call the number 1195. It's free. There's also organizations like Usikimye. Usikimye has helped so many young girls and women out here. So if you are going through gender-based violence again, look for organizations like Usikimye. There's also Federation of Women Lawyers, FIDA Kenya. They can help you. And you just know that you deserve safety. You deserve love that does not hurt. Yes. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Safari Yangu Podcast. If this conversation moved you, share it with a friend. It might save a life. Until next time, stay safe, stay kind, and keep walking your own safari. Bye.